Hi, it's Kirsty again. I wanted to talk about doubting OCD. So, is it OCD or something else? Obviously, at some point, we've all doubted whether or not we actually have OCD or whether our theme is OCD, whether the thought, feeling, or urge is real or if it is OCD. If it was as simple as being able to say it's definitely OCD, then none of us would be on this YouTube channel watching these videos. It's OCD was known as the doubting disease, so we doubt everything, including the disorder itself. So I just wanted to offer some tips on how you can approach it and what attitudes you could choose to take if you do start to doubt whether it's OCD or something else. And so the first one, of course, is doubting, is my theme real or is it OCD? So I found this, as everybody does, I found this is a very difficult one to deal with, particularly when it came to seeking the help of an OCD specialist and then joining the WhatsApp support group that's offered with OCD recovery if you work with Rob. So I would feel guilty for speaking to Rob about my OCD in case, I'm telling him lies and I'm trying to convince him I actually have OCD. And then I'd also feel guilty in the same way for speaking to other members of the WhatsApp support group about it, feeling like I'm taking advantage of people who are suffering with this disorder for real when I might not actually have it. So what helped me here to continue working on my recovery whilst having these doubts was to view it in a way that even if it isn't OCD, I've still been suffering for a very, very long time, and I didn't choose to be in this situation. And even if it's not OCD, for some reason, these methods seem to be helping me. I seem to be finding some relief in some of my symptoms, whatever else might be causing them. So why don't I just continue working on it? Is it really that awful of me to speak to these people about having OCD? If I don't have OCD, I'm still trying to offer them advice and I'm trying to support them while they work on their recovery. So is it really so terrible? So that was the approach that I took there, and that really did help me to acknowledge the fact that whether or not I have OCD, I'm still suffering here and I still deserve help as much as any other human being. Something else that makes you doubt, again, having OCD sometimes and your theme being real, is the old backdoor spike. So when you've started working your recovery and your anxiety starts to come down, you start to wonder why you're not having anxiety when you're having the thoughts, feeling and urges. If there's no anxiety, does that mean you're not afraid of it? And if you're not afraid of it, does that mean that you like it or you do want it and that it's actually true? And again here, it's just another way for OCD to catch you. And again, it's a big dose of self-compassion that's required here, alongside working on the unconditional acceptance. Because the whole idea of unconditional acceptance is whether or not this is real, I'm working on accepting the situation regardless of what it is. But as your anxiety does start to come down while you're having the various thoughts, etc., and you're pursuing your exposures and going about your everyday life, OCD will perhaps then start to morph to convince you that perhaps because you're not feeling a certain way, maybe that means you're a sociopath. So in this case, you might start having thoughts that you shouldn't be doing this particular exposure and pursuing your recovery because you're bad, because you're a sociopath. But again, we're accepting ourselves as well as our circumstances regardless. So you don't have to like the fact that you might be a sociopath, but this is your one life depending on your religion, obviously, what you believe in. But this is your time on this earth to make the best of this life. You didn't necessarily choose a brain that has OCD, and you wouldn't have chosen a brain that was the brain of somebody who was a sociopath. Sociopaths don't necessarily choose to be sociopaths. So this was something that helped me. So when my anxiety started to come down and I started to then have my OCD morph to thinking that maybe I'm a sociopath and things like that because I'm not feeling a certain way, I could start to practice having self-compassion again because I didn't choose to be that way, if that is the case. You still need to, I think there's a requirement to be willing to be selfish in your OCD recovery. And in order to help you do that, maybe you think about the fact that your friends and family want you to be okay. So therefore, you need to be selfish to pursue your recovery for yourself and for them. But after having suffered of anxiety for such a long time, sometimes it's really hard to feel other feelings and emotions, and you start to get confused about various emotions that you feel. And I think that's another thing that can contribute to doubting if it's OCD and if it's something else, you know, whether that's being a sociopath because you're not able for, maybe you're going through a phase of not being able to feel compassion very easily, mostly because you've suffered so much and you're tired and you've been anxious, but then you notice that you're struggling to feel compassion perhaps, and you start to look into the traits of a sociopath, and then you start to try and feel more compassion or what other feelings that you might be trying to feel. And of course, the more you try to do that, the less you'll be able to. So the more you might feel numb to certain things, so it just fuels the cycle. Another thing that you might find is because OCD is so confusing, and one day you feel one thing and another day you feel another thing, you might start to wonder if you have another mental health condition. For example, you may start to find yourself wondering if, do I have bipolar? Because today I feel really awful and tired, but yesterday I was feeling so good that I felt excited. The first time I started to feel excited again in recovery, I was panicky then, that I was thinking, is this, am I feeling manic? Or you might start to wonder, because of the confusion that OCD can cause, you might start to wonder, is this psychosis, for example? And again, it's the same principles that you would apply to, is this OCD or is my theme real? It's unconditional acceptance. So you could look at doing exposures that involve these other mental health conditions. Like, you'd obviously need to agree that with your OCD coach or therapist. But that might be watching a YouTube video about a documentary, for example, or something like that, or writing perhaps an exposure script, and then disputing the rationality of being scared of having these other mental health conditions. But one thing that you can think about, though, is if there's other mental health conditions that it might be that you're suffering with, or you're doubting the OCD, you're already doing some work on them anyway, because you've joined a community perhaps for support with OCD. So you're already part of a mental health community. You're already looking at working on CBT and mindfulness, which may well be tools to deal with other mental health conditions. So you could view it like that. But I am aware that OCD, themes like psychosis, and they're their own themes for OCD anyway. So I just wanted to talk about how, as you go through the recovery, how your OCD might morph to make you doubt having OCD, and throw out suggestions of it being various other things. So those were just some examples of the things that I came across, and what really, really helped me to approach them and to tackle those particular thoughts and ideas as they came up.